Tonight, we are very fortunate to have with us a very distinguished scholar in the person of Dr. Alexander Berzin. So he is coming here on the tour, on the world tour, and he is now in Malaysia, and we have invited him tonight to give us a special talk. Dr. Alexander was born in 1944 in New Jersey, USA, and received his PhD from Harvard University in 1972 from the Department of Far Eastern Languages and Sanskrit, and he specialized in Tibetan Buddhism. So I suppose he'll begin with a talk on, especially on this Tibetan Buddhism. I think I will leave it to the doctor to talk on this subject. Now he has been since 1969 residing in India, primarily in India, where he came initially as a Fulbright scholar, and then since 1972 in Dharamsala as a member of the Translation Bureau at His Holiness the Dalai Lama's Library of Tibetan Works and Archives. He has been and is still continuing his studies and practice with some of the greatest masters from all the four traditions of Tibetan Buddhism. And he has published more than a dozen books of translations with the above-mentioned library in India. These include an anthology of well-spoken advice, Mahamudra, Eliminating the Darkness of Ignorance, Dzogchen, I think it's a Tibetan word, the four-theme Precious Garland, The Wheel of Sharp Weapons, and a compendium of works of knowing, and many other books. Since 1975, he has served as interpreter for several Tibetan masters, principally His Holiness the Dalai Lama and his three late tutors when they have taught Westerners. In this capacity, he accompanied Semshab Sorkong Rinpoche, the late assistant tutor, on two world tours in 1980 and 1982. And then after the passing away of Sorkong Rinpoche, has made two further such tours, lecturing himself in 1984 and 1985. Then in April 1986, he began his current extended lecture tour to 24 countries, which included translating for His Holiness the Dalai Lama in Holland. And now he is here in Malaysia, and we are very fortunate indeed to have a Buddhist scholar to give us a talk tonight in place of the usual talk by our Chief Reverend. I now have great pleasure in calling upon Dr. Alexander Berzin to talk to us.
Thank you very much for that very kind introduction. Venerable Dhammananda, Mr. Tan, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very happy to be with you here this evening. The way that I'd like to begin is the way that usually in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition we begin any meditation session. It can also be done for beginning any talk about Buddhism or about spiritual matters. And this is to focus on the breathing. This is something that we're familiar with in all the different Buddhist traditions. The way that it's done here in the Tibetan tradition is to focus on the sensation of the breath through our nostrils as we breathe, and to count the breath. Now there are of course many different types of meditation practices which can be done with the breathing, and this particular one is used for beginning something. It is a way of putting a space in between what we had been doing and what we're about to do. The idea being that it's quite difficult for us to focus on several things at the same time. And so if we're focusing on the sensation of the breath in our nostrils and also counting, then that doesn't leave very much room in our minds for us to have various other extraneous thoughts or worries or distractions. But the way that it's done is to count out and in 1, out and in 2, like that, up to 11, and that's usually repeated 2 or 3 times. If we do it more than that, then it tends to defeat the purpose because we get tired of it, we get a little bit bored, and again our mind starts wandering. So it's done just for a short period of time, and it puts that space so that instead of just immediately going into something, we have some room to disconnect from what we had been doing and to focus our attention completely into what we're about to do. It's a very useful technique for any type of activity that we might be wanting to get into. Like, for instance, if we're going to work and now we have to sit down and we have to type a letter in an office or deal with different situations in a store or a business or whatever, often if we just immediately try to go into it, our mind isn't quite completely there. And we're still thinking about the conversation that we had before or whatever was going on in our home and so on. But if we take a few moments out to put that space by focusing on the breathing and counting, then it allows us to then be able to go into typing the letter or whatever we're doing a little bit more clearly with our mind, a little bit more there. So it's very useful. Also, we'll find that it's a very useful technique for dealing with anger, which is the basic topic that I'll be speaking about this evening, because on a very initial level, one way to deal with when we find ourselves starting to get angry, starting to lose our temper, is to focus on our breathing. Because if we focus on our breathing and counting, it tends to ground us much more with our body, and tends to put this space in between when that impulse comes to our head to get angry and when we might actually act it out by either yelling or doing something that later we might regret. But if we put that space there by focusing on the breathing, then it takes a little bit of the compulsiveness out of that energy that was going into the anger, and so it becomes much weaker. And in that way, it becomes an initial step for how to deal with difficult situations in our household or in our business, or any number of things that might come up during the day that we would find very annoying and that we might want to just say something a little bit nasty that later we would regret. So why don't we start doing this to begin with. We focus on the breathing through the nostril. Just breathe in a normal, relaxed type of way. We don't have to hold our breath or breathe in any very slow type of way or forceful way, but just normal. And breathe out and in and count that as 1, out and in 2, out and in 3, like that up to 11, and we'll do it twice. And then the next thing that is done in the Tibetan tradition is to set the intention. And this is a way of when we're starting to do something, either meditating or listening to some explanation, or again, writing a letter or doing any type of activity, it's very helpful to set the intention in the beginning and the motivation. In other words, to shape the energy in our minds, in our bodies, and direct it in a certain way so that the energy goes that way. So, for instance, to think that I'm going to try to concentrate, or I'm going to try to concentrate and do this, listen to these explanations, for instance, in order to learn various techniques that I can apply to myself in terms of dealing with anger, so that I can overcome my problems and limitations, realize more of my potentials, so that I can be of more benefit to everyone. And like that, if we try to feel that, then or think that, then that tends to make that energy go in that direction. Now, some people might recite verses for this purpose, But to recite a verse is very good, but often what happens is that it becomes a little bit mechanical, and we tend just to recite the verse and not really have any feeling or thought go on with that. And so I think perhaps we can do without a verse and just try to have that feeling within our hearts that I'm going to try to listen, pay attention, in order to be able to learn more techniques for overcoming my problems, realizing my potentials to be able to benefit everyone. So try to think that or feel that for a moment. Now the topic that we've come to discuss here this evening is working with emotions, how to deal with anger. And I suppose the reason that we've come to discuss these type of issues is that most every one of us feels that we have certain problems in our life. We want to be happy. We don't want to have any problems, but we are faced with many different problems all the time. Problems of being unhappy. Sometimes we get depressed. Problems of feeling frustrated in our work, frustrated in our social situation, our living situation, our family situation. We get problems of not getting what we want. We want to be successful. We want to have good things happen for our family, good things happen in our business, but that doesn't always happen, and we get problems with that. We become unhappy, or things happen to us which we don't want to happen, like getting sick or growing very weak when we get very old, losing our hearing or our seeing, these sort of things. Certainly nobody wants that to happen. We'll have problems in our work. Sometimes things go badly, business goes down, and that obviously is something that we don't want to happen, but it happens anyway. And we also have harm happening to us. Sometimes we hurt ourselves, we have accidents, we get sick. All these sort of things keep on going on in terms of problems that we face. Also, obviously, we face a lot of emotional and psychological problems as well. These might be things that maybe we're not so, we don't feel that it's very helpful to discuss that or to show it to others or things like that. But inside us, we do find that there are certain things which are disturbing us, certain hostilities, certain problems in terms of my expectations with my children, or my worries, my anxieties, these sort of things, which give us a lot of difficulty. And so these are what can be called uncontrollably recurring situations or problems. As was mentioned in the introduction, mostly I'm a translator. That's my background and training. And as a translator, I've traveled around the world to many different countries, translating and now also lecturing about Buddhism. And what I've discovered is that there's a great deal of misunderstanding about Buddhism. And the misunderstanding about Buddhism seems to be, for the most part, due to the English words which have been chosen to translate the original terms, the original concepts. These words were chosen, for instance, many of them in the last century by Victorian missionaries, and they have quite a strong connotation, which are not the connotations or meanings that the original words in the Asian languages meant. So, for instance, if we've been talking now about problems, now that's usually translated as suffering. And if we speak in terms of suffering, then a lot of people get the idea that Buddhism is a very pessimistic type of religion because it says that everybody's life is full of suffering, and it seems to say that we don't really have the right to be happy. If we speak to somebody who is comfortable, well-off, and wealthy, and we say to them, your life is full of suffering, then the person gets very defensive and they say, what do you mean my life is full of suffering? I have a video recorder, I have a good car, I have a nice family, these sort of things. They become very defensive, which is justified because of the word suffering. It's a heavy word. But if instead we translate the same concept from Buddhism as problems, then we can say to somebody, it doesn't matter who we are, or how wealthy we are, how many children we have, but everybody has certain problems in life. This is something which everybody is willing to accept. And so like that, I'll be discussing these Buddhist things, these explanations here from the Tibetan tradition in slightly different terms than we usually use. And so uncontrollably recurring problems is samsara. This is situations which we have no control over, and they keep on recurring. And for instance, always being frustrated, or always having worries and anxieties, these sort of things. Now, what are the true causes for them? Because the Buddha, of course, spoke about how not only are there true problems that we face, but they have causes, and it's possible to stop them as well. And the way to stop them, to achieve true stopping of them, it's an easier word than cessation, stopping. And the way to do that is to follow a true path, which is to eliminate the causes. We get rid of the causes, we've gotten rid of the problem. And so the true causes of these uncontrollably recurring problems that we face in life is basically that we don't know reality. We're unaware of who we are, who other people are, what's the meaning of life, what actually is going on in the world. And because we're unaware of these things, and I use unawareness rather than ignorance. Ignorance, again, sounds as though somebody's saying, you're stupid, you don't understand this. But rather than that, it's just simply we're unaware. And because we're unaware, we experience this as insecurity. This would be psychological level of how we experience it. And because of this insecurity, we tend to grasp for some sort of identity, some sort of me. I don't know quite who I am or how I exist. That makes me very insecure. And so I will grab onto something either true or maybe just a fantasy about myself and say, this is me, this is who I am. And so, for instance, we can grasp onto an identity as being a father or a mother. This is who I am the father, I am the mother, I must be respected in my family, my children must have a certain attitude towards me, and my entire orientation in life is in terms of being a father. Now, obviously this can get us into a little bit of difficulty, because if our children don't respect that, then that's very, very difficult. If we are now in an office or something like that, and other people don't treat us with the same respect, they don't look at us as being father or someone worthy of that type of respect, then again, that can be very disturbing to us. What happens if I'm the ruler in my family, and yet I go to the office and other people in the office are looking down on me and treating me as an inferior, and I must show respect? If we grasp too tightly to this identity of being the father and having to command respect, then we can get very, very unhappy in the office when other people don't treat us the same way. Or we could have the identity of being a successful businessman. I'm a successful businessman, this is the way I am, this is the way that I must be, and if our business fails or business gets very bad, then we're completely shattered, because this is what we've thought, that this is my image of myself, and some people might even commit suicide or do all sorts of horrible things if their business fails because they can't quite see life going on except in terms of the strong identity that they've been grasping to. Or we can base our identity on being virile. And this is who I am. I'm a virile, attractive person, or an attractive woman, whatever. And again, if we start getting old and losing our virility, this could drive us crazy. Some people could be completely shattered if that's the self-identity that they have, and they're not willing to see that things change in life. These identities aren't permanent. Or we could feel that I'm a traditional person, and so everything must be done according to traditional ways. And again, if our society starts to change and the young people no longer are following the traditions that I base my identity on, then I can become very, very angry, very upset, very hurt, because I can't really think, how can I live in a world that isn't following my traditional customs, the traditional way in which I was brought up? Or as a young person, we could base our identity on being a modern person. I'm a modern person of the world. I don't need these other traditional values. And if we grasp onto that very tightly, then if our parents start to be very insistent that we follow the traditional values and treat them in the traditional type of ways, again, as a young person, we could start to feel very, very hostile, very angry. We might not express it, but inside we would feel that, because my identity is as a modern person. I don't need to visit my parents on New Year's. I don't need to do all these traditional things. And again, we can have a lot of problems there. So we can also identify with our profession and feel that I have this certain profession, and then if that business fails, then again, if I only think of myself in terms of one profession, then again, I can't really have any flexibility. My world ends when I can't do that, and I don't see that it is possible to enter a different profession. Don't always have to be one thing. So we grasp for these different types of identities as a way to make us feel secure. We have some idea of who we are, what type of rules, what type of things to follow in life. And we tend to think that that's permanent, that that's solid and concrete, that's really me. Then what happens is that we have all sorts of disturbing attitudes which come up as ways to support that identity. It's like because we still feel insecure about that identity, somehow we feel that we have to prove it, we have to assert it. Like, I am the father in the family, and it's not enough for me to just feel that I'm the father in the family. I must assert that authority. I must assert my power over the family and make sure that everyone kowtows to me, because I have to prove it to everybody that I'm still the father. It's not enough to just know that. Or I can feel threatened about my identity, and then I get very defensive, or I can become very offensive in order to prove something. I have to prove who I am. I have to prove that I'm still virile, and so I have to go out and take another wife, have another love affair to prove that this is who I am. This is how I exist. Now, we can, these disturbing attitudes are ways then that come up for being able to maintain or prove this identity. And disturbing attitudes can be a number of different ones. They could be, for instance, attraction. Attraction is when we want to get something to us, around us, in order to make that identity secure. So, for instance, if my identity is as the father, as the patriarch of my family, then I must get respect. Or if I am the mother, I must get respect. I must have the children coming at New Year. I must have them obeying everything that I say. And somehow I feel that if I can get enough respect, that somehow that's going to make me secure. And then obviously when I don't get that respect, I become very hurt. I could become very angry. Also, I can think my identity is that I'm wonderful, I must have always good fortune and good luck, and I must always win at Mahjong. And so if, this is my identity, then I feel if I can always win at Mahjong, always win at different types of gambling things that I do, then that's going to make me secure. Or I always have to go to the fortune teller, or I always have to go with the sticks to come up with the proper answer that's going to reaffirm to me that I'm successful, that I'm okay. I'm too insecure in my own business abilities to feel that I'm going to be successful. I always have to get more signs from the gods, more signs from whoever to make me feel secure. And so I'm always compulsively after trying to do this. Or I could feel that I am a person in authority, let's say in the business, and I'm attracted to power. And power is going to make me feel secure. Now, that could, of course, work on several levels. It could be based on feeling that I'm a powerful person, or it could be based on feeling that, well, I'm not really a powerful person, but I need that power to support me. It could work on various different levels. But anyway, then we feel that if I can make everybody in my office obey me, do things the way that I want to, that will make me secure. Or if we have servants in the house, in order to prove that I am in authority and position, then I always am attracted to them doing things the way that I want to. And I might even start to give them orders to do things that are really unnecessary just to still prove who's in control. This sort of type of attitude. Or we can be infatuated with attention, getting things my own way, or as a young person, we might feel that my identity is as a modern, young, fashionable dresser. And so if I could always keep up with the latest fashions, if I could always keep up with the latest videos, the latest records, the latest things that are going on in all the fashion magazines, that this is going to make my identity secure. So we have many different ways, many different things that we could focus on, that if I could just get that all around me and build up enough of it, enough money, enough possessions, that will make me secure. But of course it doesn't always work, it hardly ever works, because if it did we would feel that we have enough. But we never feel that we have enough, and we always want more, and when we don't get it, we get angry. Anger comes up in so many different ways. Another mechanism that we use is repulsion. If I can just get certain things away from me that I don't like or that's threatening my identity, that's going to make me secure. So if I base my identity on my political views or on my race or on my culture, if I could just get everybody away who's of a different view, who's of a different color skin, different religion, that's going to make me secure. Or if I can always, let's say if my servant is doing things slightly different from the way that I want them to, or somebody who works in my office is doing things a little bit differently from the way that I want to, if I can just correct them, if I can just change that, that's going to make me secure. I like my papers arranged on the desk a certain way. This other person in my office is arranging it a different way. Somehow we feel that that's threatening us, and if I can just make them do it my way, that's going to make me feel secure. Well, really, what difference does it make? We can have many different things that we direct our hostility on in an effort to get things away from us that are threatening us. Another mechanism is closed-mindedness, which is basically building walls around ourselves. If something's threatening me, threatening my identity, well, I just say it doesn't exist. We have difficulties with our family, difficulties in work, and we come home and we have a completely stone type of face. Nothing's bothering us. We don't want to discuss it. We just turn on the television and the problem doesn't exist. This type of closed-minded attitude. Our children want to discuss a problem that we have and we just push them away. This is too threatening to my identity. My identity is that our family has no problems. Our family is perfect. It's following all the traditional values. How can you possibly have a problem and upset the balance, upset the harmony? So the only way to deal with it is to pretend that it doesn't exist. This type of attitude is called closed-mindedness. And so when we have these different types of disturbing attitudes, then the next thing that happens is that various impulses come to our head. This is what karma is talking about. Karma doesn't mean fate or destiny. Unfortunately, a lot of people seem to think that it does mean that. It's like if somebody's business fails or if somebody is hit by a car, we say, well, tough luck. That's their karma, which is almost the same as saying, well, it's God's will. We're not talking about God's will or destiny here in the discussion of karma. What we're talking about is impulses, the various impulses that come to our mind to do things. Why the impulse came to our mind to make a certain decision in our business, which turned out to be a bad decision, or why the impulse came to our mind to cross the street at just that time when we were hit by the car and not 5 minutes earlier or 5 minutes later. So this is karma. It's the impulses and it's the impulses and the various types of impulsive behavior which follow from that. So the impulse would come up to, again, make a demand on my children that they show me respect, or an impulse would come to my mind to try to yell at my office worker that they must do things not their own way, but they must do it my way. Or the impulse comes to my mind to just have a complete stone face and turn on the television and not even listen to anybody else. These sort of impulses, that's karma, come to our mind, we act them out, and that produces our uncontrollably recurring problems. That's the mechanism, the problem of then feeling always anxious, worried about my position, the problems in my family, that because I'm so closed, then all these difficulties that might be going on in the family just stay under the surface, and everybody just puts on a nice face, but inside there are all these worries and tensions which later on might just explode into a scene of violence that we've been holding it in so long. So these are the different mechanisms that go into our uncontrollably recurring problems, and we can see that it's dealing with various emotions. And of course the question comes up, are all emotions troublemakers? Are all emotions things that give us problems? And no, that's not the case. We have to differentiate between certain emotions which are very positive and constructive, like love, warmth, tolerance, patience, kindness, these sort of things, and negative or destructive emotions like this attachment, hostility, closed-mindedness, pride, arrogance, jealousy, these sort of things. It's quite interesting because there's no, I don't know in Chinese language, but in the Tibetan language there's no word for emotions. All we have is, turn over the tape. All we have is we can talk about the positive ones or the negative ones. We don't have a general word that covers both of them like we do in English. So when we speak about certain attitudes that when they're generated, when they have them, make us feel uncomfortable or uneasy, this would be a disturbing attitude. Right? When we have infatuation with things, then we feel very uneasy, don't we? Because then we're very anxious. We have to have this respect. We have to have this love and attention from somebody. There's all sorts of difficulties that come up in terms of that type of disturbing attitude. Or if we have hostility, we feel very uneasy, don't we? Or if we're closed-minded, then also that's an uneasy feeling. Whereas, so these are the ones that are the troublemakers. So we can differentiate. Like, for instance, we have love. Love is in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition is defined as a positive attitude, which is the wish for others to be happy. And so this is based on reasoning, which is that we're all equal. Everybody equally wants to be happy and not to have any problems, and everybody has an equal right to be happy. And so it's caring and cherishing others the same as we would ourselves. So it's a concern for others to be happy, which is not dependent on what they do. It's like a good mother who still loves her baby, even if the baby has soils or clothing or throws up on her. That doesn't matter. The mother doesn't stop loving the baby just because the baby got sick and threw up on her clothes. The mother still has the same concern, wish for the child to be happy. Whereas what often we call love is a type of expression of a dependency or a need. I love you, which means that I need you, and you had better do this and this and that, and be a good wife or a good husband, and always give me flowers on Valentine's Day, and do all of these sort of things, and if you don't, well, now I hate you, because you didn't do what I wanted, you weren't there when I needed you. This sort of thing, well, that's a disturbing attitude, you know, that's not the Buddhist idea of love. Love is the concern for someone, whether they send us the flowers or they don't, whether they listen to us or they don't. It's the concern for them to be happy. So we have to think in terms of our usual words when we talk about love and so on, that there can be a positive type and a disturbing type. So now we get to anger. And what's going on with anger? And anger is something which is always disturbing. Nobody's made happier by being angry. It doesn't make us feel better to be angry. It doesn't make our food taste better when we're angry and upset. We don't feel comfortable when we're angry. We can't sleep. When we don't have food, we'll be making big scenes and screaming and yelling. But if inside we are very angry and hostile about what was going on in our office or what was going on in our family, it can start to give us an ulcer. We can't sleep at night. We have all these difficulties that come up because of that. And if we are actually expressing that anger and giving very hostile looks to people, hostile vibrations to them, well, even the cat and dog aren't going to want to stay around us. They'll slowly creep away because they're made uncomfortable by our presence, by our anger. And so this is something which has no real benefits to it. And even if our anger gets so strong or so frustrated that we have to somehow vent it and we explode and we send a curse to somebody or make some evil charm to send to them, this sort of thing, of getting really angry and like that, does that really make us feel better? Does it make us feel better to see somebody else very upset? Or if we get so angry that we feel we have to punch the wall, did that really make us feel better to punch the wall? No, obviously not. That hurts. And so anger really doesn't help us in any type of way. If we're stuck in traffic, if we were to get so angry that we actually start to beat our horn and scream and curse at everybody, what good is that? Did that make us feel better? Did it make the cars go any faster? No, it just made us lose face in front of everybody else because they say, who's this idiot sitting there in the car beeping their horn? This is obviously not going to help the situation. So, if these disturbing attitudes like anger and the impulsive behavior that's based on them are the causes of our problems, are we condemned to always having trouble with them? Is it something that we always have to experience? And no, that's not the case, because they're not the nature of the mind. If they were, then our mind would always have to be disturbed. But even for the most severe cases, there are moments when we're not disturbed by anger, like for instance when we finally do fall asleep, we're still not experiencing that anger. So it is possible to have, if it's possible, that there are certain moments when that disturbing attitude like anger or hostility or resentment are not present. If that's the case, then it must mean that it's not permanent. It's not something that's always the nature of our mind. Therefore, it's something that can be gotten rid of. It's possible to stop the causes of our anger, to have our resentment, and to have peace of mind or a peaceful state of mind. Now, this doesn't mean that we get rid of all emotions and feelings and we just become, again, someone who is like a robot or a computer, but rather what we want to do is get rid of our disturbing emotions, disturbing attitudes, which are based on insecurity and our lack of awareness of reality and who we are. So to do this, the Buddhist teachings are very, very rich in many techniques. First of all, we have to have a certain motivation or a basis which would motivate us for why we want to work on ourselves and get rid of our anger, our disturbing attitudes. If we have no reason to do it, why should we do it? And so it's important to have a motivation, and we would start in terms of, well, I want to be happy and not to have any problems. I want to improve the quality of my life, and my life isn't very pleasant because I'm always feeling this resentment and hostility inside. I'm getting angry, maybe I don't express it, but it's there and it's making me feel very miserable, very upset all the time, and that's not a very good quality of life. And after all, the quality of our life is something which is in our own hands. This is one of the biggest messages that the Buddha taught, which is that we can do something about the quality of our life. We're not condemned to having to live our life in misery all the time. It's something that we can do something about. Then we would think, not only do I want to improve the quality of my life now, right at this moment, not just on a short-term basis, but also on a long-term basis. I don't want to let things get so bad that they get even worse. Because, for instance, if I don't get rid of my hostility and resentment now, then if I keep it inside, it's going to get really just worse and worse. I might get an ulcer, I might explode, and then do something really terrible. Not just something small, but send some curse on somebody, charm, and really try to destroy them. And then that could lead to, again, then the family retaliating back to me, and all of a sudden we have a perfect script for a new video on movies. And so this is something that if we think ahead, we would want to work on ourselves, get rid of our anger, so that things don't become even worse. Then we would think not only to just minimize our problems, but I want to get out of my problems altogether. Even a small amount of hostility and resentment inside is no fun. I must develop a strong determination to be free from my problems. That's usually translated as renunciation, But that again is quite a misleading translation, because it tends to give the impression that we should give up everything and go live in a cave, which is not at all what's being asked for here. What's being discussed is that I look at my problems and I say, this is ridiculous. I don't want to continue like this. I've had enough. I'm bored with it. I'm fed up with it. Enough already. I must get out. This is the important attitude that must be developed here, this determination to be free. Unless we really have made up our mind very strongly, we don't put all our energy into it. And if we don't put all our energy into it, then it's very half-hearted and we never get anywhere. And so it's important to have this very strong determination to really make up my mind. This is ridiculous. I don't want to continue like this. I've had enough. I'm bored with it. I'm fed up with it. Enough already. I must get out. This is the important attitude that must be developed here, this determination to be free. Unless we really have made up our mind very strongly, we don't put all our energy into it. And if we don't put all our energy into it, then it's very half-hearted and we never get anywhere. And so it's important to have this very strong determination to really make up my mind. I must get rid of my anger. I must overcome this out of consideration for others. I don't want to make them unhappy. It not only would cause me to lose face if I actually were to express it and make a big scene, but it would bring shame upon my entire family. It would bring shame on all my associates and so on. And out of consideration for them, I must learn to be able to control and deal with my temper and get rid of it. And even further, an even stronger motivation is that I must be able to get rid of this anger because it prevents me from helping others. If others are needing my help, let's say my children or people at work or my parents, and if I am all upset and disturbed by anger, by hostility, how can I help them? That really makes a major obstacle. And so it's very important to work through these various levels of motivation, because no matter how sophisticated the technique might be for dealing with anger, if we don't have the strong motivation to apply it, we're not going to do it. And if we're not going to do it, then what's the point? So the first step then is to think in terms of the motivation. Then, as for the actual techniques that we would use, let's look, for instance, in terms of anger. Anger is defined as an attitude with which the attitude we want to generate violence and agitation against something either animate or inanimate. So it's we look at either a person or an animal, or we look at a situation or some object, and we don't like it. We don't like what's happening with it, and we want to somehow express some violence and agitation towards it to make it change in a very violent type of way. So it's a state of intolerance and a lack of patience, which is coupled with the wish to harm whatever it is that we can't endure. So its opposite, on the one hand, is patience, because patience is the opposite of intolerance, and it's love, on the other hand, because love is the opposite of wishing harm to someone else. So usually we get angry in situations in which something happens to us which we don't want to happen, which we don't like. Like people aren't acting in the way that I want them to, they're not showing me respect, or they're not following my orders in work, or they promise to do something for me in business and they don't do it, and because they don't do it, then we get extremely angry with them. Everybody's tape is ending. We get very angry with them, or we stub our toe, and we get very angry that something that happens to us that we didn't want to occur. And now there are various ways that we can deal with this. Great Indian master Shantideva gave many lines of thought to help. He said, if in a difficult situation there's something that we can do to change it, then why worry and get angry? Just change it. Just do it. And if there's nothing that we can do, then why worry and get angry and upset? Because it's not going to help. And so if, for instance, we want to make the shuttle flight to Singapore or something like that, and we get to the airport and the flight is full, well, what's the point of getting angry? That's not going to help. It's not going to get us on the plane. If it's full, it's full. And there is something that we can do to change the situation. We can take the next flight. And so why get angry? Just make the booking for the next flight, telephone our friends in Singapore that we're coming an hour later, and finish. There's something that we could do to handle the situation. Or if our television doesn't work, then why get angry and kick it and curse and all these sort of things? Just fix it. It's something very obvious. If it's a situation that we can change, then don't get angry, just change it. But if there's nothing that we can do to change the situation, like for instance, we're caught in the rush hour traffic and there's nothing that we can do about it, we don't have a laser beam gun on the front of our car that we can zap all the cars in front of us and fly off, like in some Japanese cartoon, then what we have to do is to just accept it. Okay, I'm in the traffic, I'll put on the radio, I'll put on the cassette recorder, take some preventive measure to have brought some cassettes that we like with us if we know that we have to drive in the traffic, and make the best use of that time, or to use that time to think about some problem in our office or with our family or whatever. If there's nothing we can do to change it, then just try to make the best of it. Or if we hurt our toe, if we stub our toe in the dark, well, if we jump up and down and scream and yell, is that really going to make it feel any better? That's in American slang, we call that doing a hurt dance. You get hurt, and so then you dance up and down, jumping up and down, and really, that's not going to make it feel better. We can't change it, so I stubbed my toe. Fine, I stubbed my toe. What else is new? And just go on with whatever we're doing, because the pain is impermanent. It's something which will pass. It's not going to last forever. And jumping up and down or screaming and yelling is not going to make us feel better. What do we want? That everybody comes and says, oh, poor baby, you stubbed your toe. Or I don't know if in the Chinese tradition they do this, but in the English tradition, if a baby, if a child hurts themselves, then the mommy comes over and kisses it and makes it feel better. What do we expect? Do we expect something like that for people to treat us like a baby? No. We just, okay, I hurt myself, I stubbed my toe, let's go on with what comes next. Or if we're waiting for our turn in a queue, well, eventually it will come. And so if we think in terms of impermanence, that I'm not always going to be number 32 online, but eventually my turn will come, then that helps us to be able to tolerate the situation, and we could use that time in a different way. There's a saying, waiting has a certain pleasure all its own. And it's true, because if we have to wait our turn in queue, well, we could use that time to become aware of the other people on queue, the things that are going on in the office, or whatever. I mean, if we're there, we might as well use the time constructively rather than spending the hour cursing. Now, if somebody hits us with a stick, this is something else that Shantideva said, who do we get angry with? Do we get angry with the person, or do we get angry with the stick? Well, if we think about it logically, it should be the stick that we got angry with, because the stick was what hurt us. But that's silly. Nobody gets angry with the stick. We get angry with the person. And why do we get angry with the person? Because the stick was manipulated by the person. And so likewise, if we think further, the person was manipulated by their disturbing attitudes. And so if we're going to get angry, we should get angry with this person's disturbing attitude that made them hit us with the stick. And then we think, well, where did their disturbing attitude come from? It didn't arise from nowhere. I myself must have done something to trigger it off. I myself must have done something that made them get angry with me. And so then they got hostile and hit me with the stick. So, for instance, if I ask somebody to do me a favor and they refuse, and so I got angry, I got hurt because of that, well, if we think about it, it really was my own fault. Because I was so lazy that I didn't do it myself, I asked this other person to do me a favor. Then they refused, and then I got angry. But if I wasn't so lazy myself, then I never would have asked them, and the whole situation would never have arisen. And so basically, if I'm going to get angry at all, I should get angry with myself for having been so stupid and lazy to ask this person to do me a favor. Or even if it wasn't apparently my own fault, then we would look to see, am I really free from the disturbing attitude that's manipulating this other person? Like, for instance, selfishness. They refuse to do me a favor. Well, do I always do other people a favor? Am I somebody who always agrees to help others? And if I'm not, then why should I expect other people to always go out of their way for me? And so this is another way of dealing with anger. As I say, anger doesn't have to be always on the level of expressing it, of yelling and screaming and hitting another person. Anger is this disturbing attitude that when it arises makes us feel uncomfortable. So even if we're keeping it inside and not expressing it, that anger is very destructive inside. It really makes us very upset. And later it's going to come out in a very destructive type of way. And so this is a way to handle that within ourselves in terms of changing our attitudes. Then there's also a type of patience which is called patience which is like a target. The idea is that if you didn't set up a target, nobody would shoot at it. And so it's like in America, children have a little game. They have a piece of paper and they write on the paper, "Kick me," and they pin that on the back of their friend's clothing. And so this is called the "kick me" sign, and then everybody else sees this "kick me" on this child's behind, and then they kick them. And so it's like we ourselves have pinned a "kick me" sign onto our own behinds, and that by our own actions in the past. And this is causing all sorts of negativities and destructive things to happen to us. And so if I hadn't set up the target of acting negatively and destructively in the past or in previous lives, then the impulse wouldn't have arisen on my mind to go down that dark street at just that time when there was a mugger waiting to rob me and beat me up. Why did that impulse come to my head? Well, it came to my head I usually don't go down that dark street, but that night I thought I'll go down that dark street. And usually I go home much earlier, but that night the impulse came to my mind to stay with my friends a little longer, and then I went down that street at just that time when there was a robber waiting there for somebody to come. And so why did that impulse come to my head? It must have been that in the past I have done something in terms of hurting this person or something like that, which is now ripening in terms of cause and effect. This again is karma. Karma is why the impulses come to my mind. And so if we think, now I'm depleting my past negative karma, and I should be very happy that I'm getting off so lightly, because it could have been worse. This person only robbed me, he could have shot me also, and I should feel very relieved that now this negativity has ripened and I'm finished with it and it wasn't so bad, and it's good to get that away, to get that off my back. I no longer have a karmic debt. This type of thinking is extremely helpful. I remember once I was going on a weekend holiday with a friend to the beach, and we were driving. It was a long drive from the city, many hours, and after we had driven for about an hour and a half, we heard a funny noise in the car, and we pulled over to a repairman, a station on the side, and the person looked at the car and they said, "There's a crack in the axle, and you can't continue, and you're going to have to get a tow truck and tow you back to the big city." Now, in that situation, my friend and I could have gotten very, very angry and upset, because here we wanted to go to this lovely beach resort for a weekend rest. But with a different attitude, we looked at it in a completely different way, which was, wow, this is wonderful, how great it is that this happened, because if we had continued driving, then the axle could have broken while we were driving. We could have gotten into a terrible accident and both been killed. And so how wonderful it is that it's ripened in this way. We got off very easy, and so we took the tow truck back to the city. When we got back to the city, we borrowed another car, and then we went on a different plan. So you see, there's many ways that we could experience that type of situation. To have gotten angry and upset would not have helped at all. But if we can look at it in terms of, well, this is depleting my past karma, the negativity is ripened now, wonderful, it's finished, it could have been much worse, then we have a much saner way of handling it. There's also the type of patience which is called love and compassion type of patience, which is to regard anybody who becomes angry with us or yells and screams at us as a crazy person, somebody mentally disturbed. This could be also somebody who embarrasses us in front of others or criticizes us in front of others, which would make us lose face, and then we would get angry with them, to regard them as a crazy person. For instance, if a parrot, a talking bird, were to call us a name in front of others, well, that doesn't really make us lose face, does it? There's no reason to get angry with the bird. That's stupid. Or if a crazy person comes in and starts yelling and screaming, well, we don't really lose face from that. I mean, this is obviously a crazy person. Everybody knows that. A child has a temper tantrum or things like that. Well, that's a child. And so it's like a psychiatrist doesn't get angry with the patient when the patient is angry, but rather feels compassion for the patient. Likewise, we would try to feel compassion for whoever it is who makes a scene or gets angry with us or embarrasses us or so on, to think that, well, really, they're the one who's losing face, isn't it? I'm not the one who's losing face. Everybody sees that this person is the one who's making a complete idiot out of themselves, and so to feel compassion for them instead. Now, this doesn't mean that if somebody's trying to hit us or like that, that we don't try to stop them. It's like if our child is screaming, we do try to quiet them down. The point is to we do want to stop them from causing harm to us or harm to others or harm to themselves, but the point is not to do it out of anger. If our child is acting naughty, then we don't want to, it's not out of anger that we would want to quiet them down, but also for the child, for the sake of the child. The child is losing face. Everything is, people will think badly of the child, all these sort of things. We want to help the child out of concern, not out of anger. Then there's what's called guru-disciple type of patience, which is that a disciple can't learn without a teacher. And so if nobody tested us, we couldn't develop patience. It's like in Tibet, there was a great Indian teacher called Atisha, who came to Tibet to bring Buddhism there. And this Indian master brought with him an Indian cook. And this Indian cook never did anything the way that Atisha wanted it to be done. He was completely obnoxious, always did things in a wrong way, was very, very unpleasant. And so the Tibetan people asked Atisha, they said, Atisha, why did you bring this obnoxious cook with you from India? Why don't you send him back? We can cook for you. We can cook very well. And Atisha said, oh, but he's not just my cook. I brought him along. He's my teacher of patience. And so like that, if we have somebody who's obnoxious in our office, who's always doing things that are annoying to us, you know, like some people have very annoying habits. They're always tapping their fingers or, you know, doing whatever. To look at them as our teacher of patience. If nobody tested us, how could we really develop? So, for instance, if we have difficult situations like a long delay at the airport or things like that, to use it as a challenge. I've been training to do this. I've been training to try to be patient, and here's my chance to see if I can actually do it. If I'm having difficulty getting some form in an office or things like that, this is my challenge. It's like I've been training in martial arts, and when I now have an opportunity to use it, I would be very happy that now I can use what I've been training in. And so likewise, if we've been training to be patient and tolerant, then when we're faced with an obnoxious situation like that, we would look at it with great joy. Here's the challenge. Let's see if I can really handle it and not lose my temper, not get angry, not even feel badly inside. And like that, it becomes a much greater challenge than a challenge in a martial art contest, because we're doing it with our minds, with our feelings, much more difficult to control than our body. Also, if other people criticize us, instead of feeling angry about that I'm losing face and all these sort of things, which would normally be very upsetting, we should look at, we try to look at criticism as a chance to see where I'm at. This person who is criticizing me is pointing out things which perhaps I can learn from. And in this sense, to try to tolerate that and also see, can I handle that by myself? Because when we get very upset, in fact, that causes us to lose more face than if some crazy person is just criticizing or yelling at us. Another way of dealing with anger, another way to develop patience, is the patience of the nature of things. For instance, it's the nature of childish people to act badly and to act rudely. And so it's like the nature of fire to be hot and burn us. If we stick our hand in fire and we get burned, well, what did we expect? The fire is hot. That's what fire does. If we drive across town during rush hour, well, what did we expect? It's rush hour. That's what happens. There's traffic during rush hour. That's the nature of things. If we ask a small child to carry a tray of cups full of hot tea and they spill it, well, what did we expect? It's a child. We can't expect that the child is not going to spill it. And so likewise, if we ask other people to do us a favor or to do something in our business, to make an agreement, and then they let us down, well, what did we expect? People are childish. We can't count on others. As Shantideva, this great Indian master, said, if we want to do something positive and constructive, do it ourselves. Do it yourself. Don't rely on anybody else, because if we rely on somebody else, inevitably they're going to let us down. They're going to disappoint us and we'll get angry. So if we can look at it in this way, that, well, what did we expect? It's the nature of them to let us down. It's the nature of others to act like that. Then again, we wouldn't get angry. The last type of technique which is used is one of seeing the sphere of reality of what's going on. That we tend to label things. We tend to put a big black line, like I was saying about our identity, a big black line around me. This is who I am. This is how I must always be. And we put a big black line around somebody else. And this is the way that they are. And so if we put a big black line around someone else and say that they are obnoxious, they're no good, they're a troublemaker, this sort of thing, then, well, if they were really like that, they would always have to exist in that way. They would have to have existed that way from when they were a small child. They would have to be obnoxious to everybody, to their wife, to their dog, to their cat, to their parents, if they truly existed as an obnoxious individual. And so if we can see that people don't exist with a big black line around them, having a certain identity or a certain nature, that this is the way that they always are, that again allows us to ease off and not get so angry. So in difficult situations itself, it might be not so easy to apply these opponents. All these various ways of thinking are what are known as preventive measures. This is how I translate the word dharma. Dharma is a measure. It's something that we do or take in order to prevent problems. And so we want to safeguard against getting angry by trying to build up these different types of patience as a beneficial habit, as a way of thinking. That's what meditation means. Meditation, the Tibetan word for it, comes from the word to make a habit, to habituate ourselves to something more beneficial. And so what we would want to do is to first listen to these various explanations about the different types of patience, to think about it until we understand it, it makes sense. And if it makes sense, and we understand it, and we have a motivation of why we want to apply it to ourselves, then to build it up as a habit, a beneficial habit, by practicing, by rehearsing. And this is done by first reviewing, and then, after we review these points, to try to see and feel things in this way. And so, for instance, to picture in our minds, to use our imagination, to imagine a situation in which we often would get angry or upset. Let's say when someone in our office doesn't do things the way that we would want them to. And to try to see this person as, well, they're a human being, they want to be happy, they don't want to be unhappy, they're trying their best, but they're a child, and really they don't know what they're doing, and so on. If I can practice seeing them that way, and then feeling that way towards them, in rehearsal in my mind, when I'm sitting quietly at home, then the more that I've done this, then the more when I'm actually in the office, when they start to act obnoxious, the more that I will react in a more positive way. Instead of this impulse to get angry with them coming up so strongly in my mind, a new impulse will come to my mind, the impulse to be more patient, to be more tolerant, because I've practiced seeing them as just being like a child, someone that I should feel patience for, because by them acting in this way, they're losing face, and so I should feel compassion towards them, and to see that way, see them that way, feel that way. If we can do that through meditation, of building these ways of looking with patience, feeling patience up as a beneficial habit, then it becomes more and more a part of us. It becomes something which is our natural way of responding to things. So when we then face the difficult situation, when that impulse comes up to get angry, there'll be a space. We won't act it out so immediately, and the more positive impulse will come to act in a more beneficial way. That's why the technique that I mentioned that we did in the beginning of counting our breath and focusing on the sensation in our nose is very helpful, because it makes that space which, when that negative impulse comes up, it gives us that space in which to reconsider, do I really want to get angry and upset? Do I really want to make a scene, or is there a better way to handle this situation? And as a result of meditation, as a result of building up a more beneficial habit of seeing situations with more patience and feeling more tolerant to them, then the more positive alternative will come to our head and we'll choose that. Obviously, in order to be able to do this, we need concentration. That's why all the different meditation techniques that are so abundant in Buddhism for learning how to concentrate, well, that's not just done as an abstract exercise. They're done in order to be useful and apply them. And where do we apply them? We apply them here in difficult situations when we're dealing with obnoxious people or obnoxious situations, to concentrate on keeping our mind patient and not just out of self-control and discipline. Because if we do it out of self-control and discipline, then that anger stays inside of us and we're just putting on a very strong face on the outside, but inside it's starting to give us an ulcer. By using these techniques, what's happening is that that anger doesn't even arise. It's not a matter of controlling it and keeping it inside. It's a matter of replacing the impulses that come to our head, and rather than having negative ones, which we might deal with just keeping it inside, more positive ones will come up. And if we can do that, then we can, according to our motivation, get rid of our problems now. Things won't get worse in the future. If we can really do it, we won't have any problems like this whatsoever. And on an even greater level, we won't be causing problems to our family, to our friends, to the people around us. And on the highest level, we'll be able to help others the most because we won't be limited by all our disturbing attitudes and problems, and we'll be able to realize all our potentials to be able to benefit others. Any questions? There are two different ways of keeping quiet. One way of keeping quiet is to still get angry, but just keep it inside. The other way of keeping quiet is that the anger just doesn't arise. You know, if somebody is starting to act rudely towards us or not show us respect or these sort of things, we could keep quiet and not say anything, but get very hurt and angry inside, or we can say, well, they're a child, what do I expect? And what difference does it make, really, whether or not they're showing me this respect? So there's two different ways. Yes?
You mentioned that how to deal with angry with somebody else. What if you're angry with yourself? How can someone do something really idiotic and say, oh shit, I did it? No, you really hurt yourself and say, you want to kill yourself.
Right. Well, the question is, what happens when we get angry with ourselves? That I did something that I shouldn't have, and then I get really angry with myself. Well, you see, there are various stages that we go through. It's like if we're trying to, let's say, stop smoking or something like that, stop acting in a very unpleasant way with others or whatever the example might be, we could use discipline. I know that I shouldn't do this, smoking is bad for me, it's going to cause me cancer and so on, or I shouldn't always be so authoritarian with my family because it just makes for an unpleasant atmosphere, these sort of things. And we use discipline to stop ourselves, but discipline is not easy to use all the time, and what happens is intellectually I know I shouldn't do this, but I find that I'm doing it anyway, and so I get angry with myself. Now, getting angry with ourselves is not a very easy state of mind to make any constructive change. It doesn't make it anything better. What happens usually is it spills over to the next step, and the next stage is to feel guilty. I'm guilty, I'm so bad, I smoked another cigarette, or I made another scene with my family that just left everybody with this tension that was so unpleasant. You know, I feel guilty about it. Now, guilt is a strong identification with being a naughty child, right? I'm a naughty child, I did wrong, mommy and daddy aren't going to like me, this type of thing. And it's a very difficult state of mind within which to be able to change, because the more guilty we feel, the more we identify with being this naughty child, and the more we identify with being the naughty child, the worse we feel, the more guilty we feel. So it's a loop, it's a circle. And what we have to do is go to the next step, and the step beyond anger, beyond guilt, is boredom. It's the step of feeling just so completely bored. I'm so bored. I'm so sick and tired of all this hassle with the smoking and stopping and not stopping and these sort of things. I'm so sick and tired of all the tension in my household or the tension in my office because of these confrontations of authority and power that lead so much tension and uneasiness. I'm just tired of that. Enough already. This is boring. This is stupid. And to develop what I was talking about before, this determination to be free. If I can develop this determination to be free, then I'll actually do something to change. And so I think that's the way to deal with being angry with us. So we have to take it the next step. Don't just stay with that anger, but try to develop it further to the point of saying, enough already, this is ridiculous, I have to get out, and then actually change whatever it is that is making us angry at ourselves about it. Then we apply this type of thing to other people, yes, because what happens is if we apply this to others, again, let's see the counterparts. The counterpart of using discipline for ourselves is coming on very heavy towards the other person and trying to discipline them. I forbid you to smoke. I forbid you to stay out late at night. These sort of things that I'm sure most parents have experienced. Then the next step is that we get angry with the person because they're not listening to what we tell them, and that spills over to the next step. The counterpart of guilt is to judge them and to come on very strong and heavy, you're bad, you're wicked, you don't respect me, and try to make them feel guilty. This sort of thing, which only builds up resentment and makes for very uncomfortable feelings. And again, if we condemn the child into being, the naughty one who is, morally guilty, then again, we never leave that child any room to be able to change, to be able to correct their way of behavior. And so again, we have to go to the next step. The next step, the counterpart of our determination to be free of our own problem, is compassion, which is the wish for them to be free of their problem. And so I have this strong determination that I'm going to try to help you to overcome your problem. Let's discuss it human being to human being. Let's not discuss it just in terms of, I'm your parent, you're the child, you must show me respect, you're not showing me respect, therefore you are guilty, you are, unfilial. These sort of tricks that we can lay on our children to relate to them now as a human being. Human to human. What's the problem? What is the difficulty? Let's discuss this, not in terms of these set roles, but just one human being to another. That's the way I think to do it. Yes?
Is there anything wrong with the issue of anger in order to change another person? At the same time, we feel
Right, that's exactly the question is there anything wrong with showing our anger towards others, but inside we don't feel that. I mean, we're feeling more kindness towards them, and this is sometimes very useful. I wouldn't call it expressing our anger or showing our anger. I would instead call it being a little forceful. Right? Now, sometimes it's necessary to be forceful. Let's say if our child is about to run into the street and be hit by a car, we don't just sit there and say, oh dear, don't run into the road. We have to grab that child, and maybe we have to be very heavy with them to impress on them how dangerous it was, that they could be hurt. So sometimes it's very helpful to express, to do things in a strong way, but not with anger. It's very true on many different levels. Not only our children, it could be in the office, it could be on any different type of level. Sometimes we have to show ourselves to be very strong. We have to be forceful in order to make an impression. But if it's done with anger, then it just creates hostility on the other side. If it's done with concern for the other, then it's much more light. We're not upset. The other person can see that. It's like, if we discipline our children, it's necessary, of course, to discipline them, but they don't do it out of hatred for them, out of anger for them, they do it out of love. It's quite different. What we're talking about is the disturbing attitude inside, which makes us so upset and tense, and which then causes so much trouble. Any other questions? Well, if not, then as we've seen, there are many different ways for dealing with anger. It's not that we're condemned to always be somebody who has an ulcer because we have so much resentment and hostility inside. There are many ways to prevent that, many ways to deal with that. That is what Dharma is talking about. Buddhist teachings, Dharma are preventive measures that we can take to avoid this and to get rid of these problems. And so the way that we end is with a dedication. And a dedication, remember the way that we began, was with setting the intention, which was to, in our mind, shape our energy and move that energy in a certain direction. We wanted to listen to this in order to learn techniques to deal with my own problems, so that I can overcome my limitations, realize more of my potentials, so that I can be of more benefit to others. And so likewise, at the end, we sum it up, because it's very easy when we walk out for the positive energy or potential that's built up here, that we've built up here, to just disperse. But if in our minds we shape it, we think of it and move it in a certain direction, then it will actually go in that direction. It actually makes more of an impression on us. And so we think whatever positive potential we've built up from discussing these things may go towards everybody, not just myself, but everybody being able to overcome their anger, overcome their disturbing attitudes, their problems, their limitations, and realize all their potentials so that we can all be of greater benefit to everyone. So let's try to feel that for a moment.